2016, 40% of all children born in the U.S. were born outside of marriage. Why? Why? Because there are penalties for marriage in America. Take AFDC, for example, a government program designed so that a family's benefits are reduced as earnings rise, right? So in practice, this means that if a low-income single mother marries an employed father, her welfare benefits will be substantially reduced. For example, a single mother with 2 children who earns $15,000 per year will generally receive some around $5,000, $5,200 per year in food stamp benefits. However, if she marries a man with the same earnings level, her food stamps would be cut to 0. So why was this created? It was created to destroy a strong father figure in the home. And in return, it just simply makes the state your daddy.
In the early 1980s, the CIA of the United States government flooded black neighborhoods with crack cocaine.
This is the topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. This is going to be both for my community and white people. You know, the ones that say racism doesn't exist. First off, you have to understand that crack was pushed into our communities to keep us from succeeding. But it's the fact that black people were thrown in jail left and right. There are still black people today, y'all, from the 80s, the 90s, who are still doing time in the pen for petty marijuana charges. Not to mention that it could have been a grandmother who had a grandchild who was staying with her who was selling drugs. And guess what? Even though she didn't even know that her grandchild was selling drugs, she was still thrown in prison, y'all. This is how black people were treated during the crack epidemic. Let's fast forward. You have fentanyl, which is being pushed in here by China to destroy white people. I'm not going to be the one to sit up here and lie to you. And let's not forget that when black people were going through the crack epidemic back in the 80s, they were all criminals who needed to be thrown in jail. But today, when fentanyl is affecting mostly a certain demographic of people's community, oh, little Timmy had a hard life. His parents neglected him. Nah, little Timmy is a criminal that needs to be thrown in jail, just like black people during the crack epidemic. Not to mention, you got people out here walking around with Narcan to save their people. And if you can't see it, I'm not going to even try to make you see it. And at the same time, I can't even be mad at China because at the end of the day, I remember America basically flooding opioids into their communities. It kind of seems like everything you try to do to everybody else as a nation is starting to come back to haunt you. And that's it.
Good morning. Now it's safe to say that crime has existed as long as humans have been on this planet. But did you know that there's a recipe for crime that allows you to create crime where none may exist? True story. So let's break this down into 2 parts, the recipe and the application. Part 1, the recipe. People minus resources plus proximity and opportunity equals crime. Let me say it again. People minus resources plus proximity and opportunity equals crime. So how do you apply that? Well, here are your instructions. So you start off with a bunch of people and you place them in an economically depressed area where all the good paying jobs in grocery stores have been removed and been replaced with gas stations, liquor stores, and pawn shops. The reason you want to do that is because now you have a group of people with little to no income and no access to nutritious food who have a bunch of bills and are now hungry, who then go to the liquor store to self-medicate while other economically depressed people are waiting for the opportunity for you to leave so that they can steal whatever you have, bring it to the pawn shop to get money to either feed their family or their addictions. And that's how you create crime where none exists. Because creating crime justifies policing. And policing justifies locking people up. And locking people up fulfills the state's contracts that they signed with private prisons to keep those prisons at 80 to 90% occupancy, even though crime rates have fallen. And all of that provides the United States government with a labor force that they can pay slave wages to. Because in the United States, slavery is a form of punishment for anyone who's been convicted of a crime. That's the end game. That's the entire purpose of creating crime. And that's why they call it the projects. Because the end goal is to justify the criminalization and the enslavement of an entire group of people. Making it legal for them to arrest our leaders, raid our homes, break up our meetings, and then vilify us night after night on the evening news, and they knew they were lying about it. And that's why they call it the projects, because the project was to figure out how to create crime where none exists. Also, black on black crime, doesn't exist. It's a myth created by white supremacists to support the notion of black criminality. Now, the notion of black criminality stems from us simply existing within white spaces, because us being off the plantation was something suspicious. And after the emancipation of enslaved Africans, the very first law that went into effect was vagrancy laws. And vagrancy laws meant anybody who didn't have a job or a means to support themselves or a place to stay was a vagrant. And who were the vagrants of the day? The newly freed enslaved Africans who didn't have a plantation to work on. And overnight, the prison population went from 95% white to 95% black. Where we were leased back to the plantations we were just freed from.